happy to tell you we will defeat Donald Trump, taking on virtually the entire Democratic establishment, senators and governors and members of Congress and mayors. Despite all of that opposition, we have now received well over 45% of the pledged delegates. And if we do well in the coming weeks in Oregon, in California, in New Jersey, in Kentucky, and the other states, we still have that road to victory in winning the majority of pledged delegates.
Let me just start off with you, Linda. Listening to Bernie Sanders' remarks there, what did you make of his tone? It seemed to be a little bit different than what we've heard from previous rallies.
Yeah, I mean, as you pointed out, he started off by saying, let me be really clear, we're in it to win it, which I think he needed to start with based on some of the conversations that have been happening recently and, of course, based on the math. He also said, look, we're good at arithmetic. We realize that this is an uphill battle. And so he cast himself in a place where I think he's very comfortable saying, we're an underdog. We've always been an underdog, and so this is no different. One thing worth noting is that as part of his remarks, he did also highlight some of the national polling, and he also specifically called out the Quinnipiac polls, which showed that he has a larger lead over Donald Trump than Hillary Clinton does. And so if you tie all of those things together, saying, I'm going to be making the case to the superdelegates, he's painting the picture of exactly what his case is, which is you should actually support me because if you look at the polling, I'm in a stronger position to beat Donald Trump, the one thing we agree on, than anybody else.
Yeah, and what about that, Steve? Because the numbers, when you look at that Quinnipiac poll, it might have surprised some people to see that Hillary Clinton, when you looked at a head-to-head matchup between Clinton and Trump, there was basically a statistical tie, neck-and-neck race between Clinton and Trump. So now you have Bernie Sanders, fresh off this win in West Virginia, making the case that, look, for those of you who thought that she would be the only person capable of defeating him, this should give you food for thought.
Right. I mean, part of this is, we were talking about this earlier, so Sanders versus Trump. Sanders, I think, can be seen a little bit more as maybe more of a generic Democrat than Hillary Clinton in the sense that he is not as tested nationally as somebody like Hillary Clinton is. Let's remember, this was John Kasich's argument during the primaries against Donald Trump. I can win versus Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump can't. Yet we saw where they got John Kasich in the primaries, right? It's not about the matchup in the general election 6 months out in November. It's about whether you can actually win these primaries moving forward. Right now, we know with Sanders, he needs a significant larger number of delegates than she does. She's 94% of the way to clinching. She only needs to win 14% more of the delegates that are left. That's a lot easier for her to do. In fact, she could lose out in terms of the rest of the primaries and still clinch this nomination. Now, making the arguments to the superdelegates, that's one thing. But actually getting them to switch is another uphill battle. And we were talking about this earlier. At what point do the wagons start to circle around Hillary Clinton in terms of these superdelegates, in terms of the leaders in the Democratic Party? Is that going to be when she clinches, which is in the next few weeks? At least clinches by the metric that we've all been using for the past several cycles, which is superdelegates plus pledged delegates. Will that happen? I think it probably will. I think you're going to start Democrats looking at this race and saying it is now hers. She is now the presumptive nominee because she has hit 383 delegates, super and pledged. And so when that happens, then I think Sanders' argument starts to get a lot more watered down.
To be clear, though, I don't think that argument, and you touched on this a little bit, is to his supporters. Because as we've seen from other exit polls, they don't. If he wins, the people who support him don't care about electability. Mm-hmm. That's never been their thing. I think he's making this winnability argument specifically to the superdelegates, right. And it's a last-ditch effort, right? We know
that's all he has left.
Exactly. We know based on everything we know about how the Democratic system works and where superdelegates are from and who they are. It's very unlikely. It's a serious Hail Mary.
But didn't I hear? Oh, go ahead, Caitlin.
I was going to say, and he has really no incentive to drop out before the end of this. I mean, he has the money. Yes, his fundraising has been cut in half, but that's cut in half means $20-something million,
$26 million, yeah.
Which is, twice, 3 times as much as some of the Republicans bring in. So he has the money to continue. He obviously has a message that's compelling to his supporters and something that he's cared about for a long time. So, and Hillary Clinton's in this difficult position where she can't ask him to drop out. She's not telling him to drop out because she did the same thing in 2008.
And let's not forget, she not only did the same thing in 2008, but she won more states than Barack Obama at the end in 2008, even when the math wasn't working in her favor. And it didn't sway any superdelegates. In fact, once he got to that number, the superdelegates started flocking to him. In fact, the superdelegate argument was completely different then because she actually wound up having more superdelegates then. They flocked to Barack Obama because he was a winner. They didn't flock to him because of some idea that that he could be a better candidate in the fall. They flocked to him because he actually got to the number of pledge delegates they needed to get to, and it was mathematically impossible for her to actually become the nominee. That's why they switched over.
And even then, we're talking about maybe 24 superdelegates
that's true.
who swapped over.
We're not talking about hundreds, which is what he
delegates.
needs. That's right.
Exactly.
So an uphill climb it is,
Yes.
indeed.
Exactly, and especially when it comes to superdelegates, as we've talked about before, these are, real party loyalists, people that have been very active in the party for a long time. Bernie Sanders does not fit the bill of someone that they would be able to switch to.
One of the things he did say in his remarks in Oregon, it was interesting to note the demographic. He focused on the fact that he has the support of young people. And one of the things he said as he tried to make this case to the superdelegates is what that tells me is that the people need to look at that because this is the future of the Democratic Party. So you want to say something about that?
If you look at the exit polling, not including tonight, but up until tonight, right, he crushed among younger voters. I mean, 70 some odd percent to 20 some odd percent.
Isn't that part of his argument to superdelegates?
Okay, but she flipped those numbers, and that's what she did with older voters. Yet the percentage of people who voted in the exit in the primaries, more older voters than younger voters. So you could make the argument all you want about enthusiasm in younger voters, but in terms of sheer numbers of people actually getting out to vote, there are more older voters that actually get out to vote. So that's why she's won more votes in these primaries than he has. Is because more older people vote than younger people. So you can make that argument all you want. She has equally won that percentage, the flip side, among older voters that he has among younger voters, yet she's reaping the benefits of it because more of those older voters actually get out to vote.
She does need to make some headway there, though. I think we all agree with that.
No question, but that's not the sole argument as to why you should support a candidate because he has younger voters. Well, she's getting more voters with the older voters with the same kind of percentage.
Sure, absolutely, 100%.
But yes, she has to figure out a way, if she's going to be the nominee of this party, to get some of those younger voters to support her because she's going to need that energy and enthusiasm in a general election, especially if we're walking into some of these swing states like these polls showed where she's neck and neck with Trump and her unfavorables are comparable to Trump's. She's going to need something more than just the people who've been voting for her now. She's going to need some real energy.
I mean, because he was really blunt in his remarks, though, because he said basically if you look at that data that shows that the younger voters are with me, what that tells me is that our vision, my vision, Bernie Sanders' campaign vision is the future of America and, by extension, of course, the future of the Democratic Party. And so it sounded as though he was essentially making this case, trying to make this case that, look, if you are not with us, yes, we can look at the demographic of older voters going for Hillary Clinton. However, the hearts and minds of the future are with me.
Right, but every 4 years is always a candidate that captures the hearts and minds of younger voters. And the problem every 4 years is it's never enough to get that person the nomination, right? It just never is. Obama was one of the only people, I think, in recent memory I can think of who could transcend age. He brought younger people, he brought older people, he brought everybody into this and wound up winning the nomination. But that's very rare. Usually there's a candidate who appeals to the younger voters. There's just not enough of them to propel them to victory.
And we're also specifically talking about younger white voters. And we have to keep in mind that the Democratic Party is a big tent party. And I feel like I've said this till I'm blue in the face. You cannot be the Democratic nominee and not have support from communities of color. And to date, we haven't seen that Bernie Sanders is able to move those folks, notwithstanding the fact that there were a number of people of color standing behind him at the podium in Oregon.
Yeah, because that was also interesting to hear. Part of his rhetoric as well is talking about that we are a party of being inclusive, and this is why Donald Trump is not going to win.
Why he's sitting in this position today is because he couldn't win anywhere in the South. He couldn't win anywhere in a lot of these really diverse states, right? And so that is the reason why he's so far behind her delegates. She wound up winning huge in places like Florida and in southern states. And, without that, you're not going to win the Democratic nomination. It's just not possible.
Yeah.